You live here rent-free, Mom. We think it's time you contribute maybe half your savings. Drew said it like he was suggesting I try a new recipe. Light tone, confident posture. He didn't even glance at me, just focused on the coaster under his mug. Jessa sat beside him. Legs crossed her lips, curled into the polite smile she wore whenever she was about to say something cruel. We could use it for a down payment, she added, as if my life savings were just sitting there waiting to be useful to them. Everyone wins. I stirred my tea slowly, letting the warmth of the cup ground me. Then you won't mind if I update some paperwork this week, I said. Their expressions didn't shift right away. But it came first, in Jessa's eyes narrowing slightly, then in Drew's hesitation as he sat back in his chair. They didn't expect pushback. They expected gratitude. I used to think the house felt quieter when Drew moved back in. It doesn't anymore. Now the air feels thick with expectation. Not care, not concern, just calculation. They called this a family meeting, but I hadn't been told until this morning. Jessa made a lasagna store-bought, I noticed, and said she wanted to make things official. I assumed it was about chores, or maybe a timeline for finding a new place. I never imagined it would be about slicing my savings in half to fund their future. Drew reached for the pitcher of water, but knocked a spoon instead. The clang rang louder than it should have. I picked it up, set it back into place. Then I stood and carried my tea to the window. Outside, the backyard still held the bench my husband built before the cancer came. He carved our initials underneath the seat. It's still there. 2 years ago, Drew stood on the porch with a duffel bag and a shaky voice. He'd been laid off again, and Jessa was pregnant. She wasn't anymore, though neither of them spoke about it much after the first few months. I didn't ask questions. I opened the door. Just until we get back on our feet, he'd said. I cooked, made space, emptied a closet. They slept in the guest room at first, then moved to the larger bedroom without asking. I let it slide. He was my son. She was family. But things shifted. Slowly, at first. My favorite reading chair, the one I bought after my husband passed, was gone one morning, replaced by something boxy and beige. My sewing basket had been tucked into the hall closet with a note taped to it. We're organizing the space, Jessa said cheerfully that morning. This house feels like home now. I nodded, smiled. But something inside went cold. I didn't need much. Never have. But I notice when things disappear, when the music gets louder, when my name stops being on the grocery receipts, when the quiet I once loved turns into a kind of pressure, like I'm waiting in a room I no longer own. Tonight only confirmed what had already begun months ago, that this wasn't just about staying, it was about claiming. They believe my silence means consent, that not fighting them means agreeing with them. But I'm not quiet because I'm lost. I'm quiet because I'm watching. After they went to bed, I stayed downstairs, cleaned the counters, wiped down the table, opened the drawer where I keep the tax returns, the deed, the passwords. Still there. Still mine. Their voices filtered through the vent upstairs. Jessa's was high and clipped. Drew's was low and tired. I caught pieces. She's being difficult. We're entitled. It's not fair. I didn't need to hear the rest. I closed the drawer, gently turned off the light, and went upstairs. I couldn't sleep. The house was too still. The silence pulled tight like thread on a needle. So I got up, made tea, and sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. My bank app loaded slowly, as if it too was hesitant to show me what I already suspected. There, it was a flagged login from 2 days ago, listed as tablet. I hadn't used one. But Jessa had one. She used it in the kitchen, constantly watching tutorials and shopping for furniture she had no business buying. I changed the password. Not in anger, not in fear. Just quiet resolve. My hands didn't shake. Next, I checked the joint grocery card. The one we'd all agreed was for food and essentials. I paid it off every month thinking I was keeping the house running, but there were purchases from places I'd never stepped foot in. A boutique in town, an online electronics store, a subscription to something called Glowbox. I scrolled back further. 3 months' worth of charges all carefully spread out like they thought I'd never look. I printed every transaction. 3 pages total. Then I opened the drawer by the fridge, pulled out a manila envelope, and wrote in black ink across the front, "For attorney use." They wanted access. They already had it. They didn't ask. They helped themselves. I wasn't even angry. That's what surprised me most. There was no heat behind my eyes, no sting in my chest. Just distance. I watched the printer spit out page after page, line after line of what they'd taken. Jessa had signed the back of one of the receipts. A small detail, but it would matter. I clipped it to the top. The kitchen clock ticked. Midnight passed. I sat still, listening to the rhythm of it all. The quiet wasn't so heavy now. It felt like waiting, like something had started to turn. And in the morning, I knew exactly where I needed to go. The office looked just the same: leather chairs that creaked when you sat down, a side table stacked with legal journals no one ever really read, and a framed photo of Gerald and me on the bookshelf behind Halstead's desk. That picture had been taken on our 30th anniversary. I was wearing a blue scarf he gave me the day he was diagnosed. Halstead rose when I entered, his face softening with something close to concern. "Colin," he said, and the way he said my name made it feel like I still had someone on my side. We didn't waste time. I pulled out the envelope, placed it on the desk, and said, "I want to protect what's mine, before they take more." He nodded slowly, opening the folder with practiced care. "Revocable living trust property transfer and updates to your will." I nodded. "And a new medical power of attorney," I added. "Drew?" he asked. No. And not his wife either. He didn't press, just uncapped his pen and started the paperwork. The hours passed quietly, filled with terms like successor, trustee, executor, non-contest clause. Words that used to sound heavy now felt like armor. We moved methodically. When it came time to assign someone for health decisions, I didn't hesitate. "My goddaughter Marin," I said. "She's calm under pressure, and she asks before assuming things." He smiled, scribbled her name. We went over everything twice then, once more for good measure. At the end, I initialed and signed page after page, each stroke of ink drawing a firmer line between what I would allow and what I would no longer tolerate. As I stood to leave, Halstead handed me a stamped copy of the deed now held in trust. My name stood alone. "You're not punishing them," he said gently. "You're protecting yourself." I nodded, holding the file to my chest. My fingers felt warm, my ribs tight. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked to my car slowly, deliberately. My hands were lighter, but when I opened the door and sat behind the wheel, I knew my heart wasn't. I cleared out the guest room that afternoon, folded the linens, stacked the spare pillows, and moved the sewing machine into the closet. I didn't need space for guests. I needed space for proof. The printer hummed steadily as I scanned receipts and bank statements one by one. I laid out photographs of furniture I'd purchased, each labeled with a date and the store. The dining set the mattress. The old desk chair Drew always borrowed, but never returned. I took photos of those too. Better to be ready. A shoebox of warranties sat beneath the bed. I pulled it out and found something else, tucked behind the laundry basket, an envelope with Drew's name scribbled across the front. Inside, a stack of blank job applications. Unfilled. Not even signed. The dates on them were from last spring. That's when he told me he was still trying. That he was sending out resumes every week. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty lines where a name should have gone, where effort should have been. By evening, my knees ached from bending and sorting. The sun had dropped behind the oaks outside the window, when I heard Jessa's voice drift up the stairs. Sharp, clear, like she wanted to be overheard. If we had access to that money, she said we wouldn't need to wait anymore. Not ask, not earn, just access. I opened my journal and wrote down the date, the time, and what she said. I underlined it once. Then I stood up and went to the hall closet, the one by the front door. I pulled out the small safe, the one that held birth certificates, insurance papers, and a few personal letters I wasn't ready to reread yet. It was heavier than I remembered. I carried it up the stairs one step at a time and locked it inside my bedroom closet. Then I sat on the edge of the bed again and listened to the floorboards creak below me. They were moving about like everything still belonged to them. And I started wondering what else they'd already decided was theirs. The teller at the bank recognized me. "Morning, Mrs. Ward," she said brightly. I smiled back, though the name felt heavier than it once did. "Just Callan," I corrected, "and I need to make some changes." We sat in her small cubicle, the kind with low walls that don't really give you privacy, just the illusion of it. I slid my ID across the desk. "I'd like to freeze all joint access. Immediately." She hesitated, glancing at the screen. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I'm just getting my house in order." She nodded, typed, and asked for a few security answers. When she finished, she looked up. "There's also an old account from years ago, credit union, different name." I almost smiled. "Yes, my maiden name. I'd like to reopen it." The paperwork took half an hour. By the time I left, my savings were safe, my new account active, and a system in place to alert me of any access attempts. I gave her my number, told her to flag anything unusual. Before leaving, I withdrew a few hundred in cash, small bills, easy to tuck away. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to feel what security actually felt like. Driving home, the early afternoon light spilled across the windshield, and my mind drifted back to Drew's 5th birthday, the one where he wanted a model rocket that cost too much. I sold my grandmother's brooch to buy it. The pawn shop clerk had offered less than it was worth, but I'd taken it anyway. Drew's face had lit up when he unwrapped the box. "You're the best mom," he'd said, wrapping his arms around me. That hug had made it worth it, or so I thought. I remembered thinking that sacrifice was love, that giving was how you showed it. Now I wondered if I'd been teaching him something else entirely. The house came into view, the curtains drawn tight, the driveway too full. I parked on the curb and sat for a long minute before stepping out. It was time to set things in motion. I waited a week. I didn't speak more than necessary. I kept the routines, the same breakfast, laundry, a short walk around the block. But beneath it all, something had already shifted. Then on a Wednesday morning, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. Cream paper sealed neatly. Inside were 3 printed sheets, one listing monthly utilities, one with grocery bills, and one with the mortgage payment history, each with my name, my account, my signature. All paid. Every line item circled. Tucked in front was a typed note, no more than 2 lines. "If this home no longer meets your financial expectations, I welcome you to create your own." I didn't sign it. They would know. I made tea in the upstairs hallway nook, the one I'd claimed as my own, long before Jessa started rearranging the downstairs. The kettle whistled as I heard Drew come into the kitchen. A pause. The sound of the chair scraping. Paper sliding out of the envelope. Then silence. Jessa's voice came next, tight, low hissing. "I couldn't make out every word, but I heard she's serious, and you said she wouldn't." I added honey to my tea. I didn't go down. I sat on the window bench, letting the warmth settle through my hands. There was no plan to argue, no invitation to discuss. I didn't want an apology. I wanted the truth to sit with them as long and as heavy as it had sat with me. I heard the back door open, then close. Drew leaving, probably to take a walk and cool his temper. He used to do that when he was a teenager. Storm out when he didn't get his way, then come home quiet and contrite. But this time was different. There was no grounding to lift, no car keys to return. This was my house. This was my line. And while they whispered and paced and waited to see what I'd do next, I already knew what they'd do. Because when you take something that isn't yours, you expect backlash. You don't expect silence. They waited until after dinner. I could tell by the way the dishes stayed untouched, the tension hovering between their glances. I stayed at the sink, rinsing plates that didn't need it, letting them build their courage. Jessa spoke first. "We've already listed this address as our loan cosigner," she said, her tone rehearsed. "It's too late to change." I turned off the tap. "You did what?" Drew leaned forward from the table, his voice steady, but his eyes darting. "It's not just your house anymore, Mom. You're part of this family. It made sense to include you." "To include me," I said. "Or to use me." He looked down at his hands. The same hands I used to hold crossing streets, the same ones that once reached for mine when he was scared of thunder. Now they were still folded neatly on the table, avoiding accountability. Jessa pushed her chair back. "You're overreacting. It's just paperwork. You're acting like we stole something." I dried my hands slowly, the towel silent against the counter. Then I walked to the sideboard, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a folder. Inside was the notarized deed, the one I'd signed last week. My name, my trust, my chosen successors. I placed it in front of them. "This house," I said, "is under my name only, legally, permanently, and you have 2 weeks to move out." Jessa's mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Then, "You can't be serious. After everything we've done for you." "For me," I interrupted. "You've lived here rent-free. You've spent my money. You've listed my address on your loans. That's not help. That's theft." Drew looked at me, disbelief flickering across his face, like he couldn't recognize the person standing in front of him. "Maybe he couldn't. You're choosing this fight," Jessa said. "No," I said quietly. "I'm ending one." I gathered the folder, placed it on the center of the table, and walked past them toward the stairs. Behind me, the room filled with whispers and half-broken sentences, the kind that come when people realize the rules have changed. Upstairs, I locked my door and began to plan what would come next. The house has gone quiet, but not the kind of quiet that soothes. This one hums with resentment, a silence that presses against the walls like a storm waiting for release. Drew barely speaks. When he does, it's clipped like every word costs him more than he's willing to give. He doesn't look at me, not directly. I've become something he walks around now like a closed door. Boxes line the hallway. They pack during the day when I'm gardening or gone to the store as if pretending I won't notice. I notice. One afternoon, I'm clipping back the mint when the officer knocks. "Noise complaint," he says, kind but embarrassed. A neighbor says there's yelling. There hasn't been. Not from me. I reach into the drawer just inside the foyer and hand him a sealed envelope. My lawyer's contact, plus the notice of eviction and property documentation. He glances through the letter, nods. "Sorry to trouble you, ma'am." He doesn't come in. The door closes quietly behind him. I go back to the yard and snip a few more sprigs. Later, Mrs. Latch from across the street catches me by the mailbox. She's holding a lemon tart in a ceramic dish and an envelope she forgot to mail. "You need anything, you call me, all right? You want to go somewhere for a bit, just to get away? I'll take you." I thank her. I take the tart and tell her I might stop by this weekend. Then I glance back at the house just in time to see a suitcase thump down the stairs. Drew's boots following a second later. "I won't be the one leaving," I say quietly. He doesn't hear me. By Friday, the guest room is stripped bare. Jessa's cosmetics are gone from the upstairs bath. She slams the car door like it's the last word in an argument I never joined. I water the porch plants and trim a dead leaf from the fern. Upstairs, a drawer opens and closes. Soon, it will be only me again. And I wonder, wasn't it always 3 weeks pass? The house holds a different kind of silence now, not heavy, not waiting, just still. I start with the guest room, the one they claimed as theirs. I repaint the walls a soft, warm gray, something neutral. I buy fresh towels, replace the lamp Jessa took. New linens, new scent. I open the windows for the first time in months and let the air shift everything. I update my emergency contact list, remove Drew's number, add my goddaughter's. I write her address neatly in the planner I keep by the phone. Then I go upstairs to the hall closet where the old sweaters sit in a lidded box. Behind them, on the back shelf, I find a photo. Drew at 5. He's missing 2 front teeth, holding a frog in one hand and a popsicle in the other, mud streaked across both cheeks. I don't cry. I don't smile either. I study it for a moment, then place it gently in the drawer of my bedroom desk, face down. Downstairs, the tea finishes steeping. I carry the cup into the den and pull the trust paperwork from the safe. Every page has been signed, notarized, sealed. I double-check the file, then place it into the drawer marked complete. There's nothing left to change. Nothing left to guard. I sit by the window with my tea and watch the neighbor's dog chase squirrels through the lawn. The mail truck turns the corner. A sparrow lands on the porch railing. In a world that keeps spinning sometimes, stillness is the loudest relief. I don't listen for footsteps upstairs anymore. I don't wait for doors to open. I lock them out of habit now, not out of fear. And when the kettle whistles again, I rise without urgency, because for the first time in a long while, everything in this house is exactly where it belongs.